Hi everyone, Pitch Canker here. I'm a full-time artist you might recognize from my red, black, and white illustrations, and today I'm going to be going over the world building for the graphic novel I've been working on. It's a medieval epic horror story called NITHEFUL Kingdom. In this video I just want to go over, my inspirations for the project, what my goals are, how I got started, and what the process looks like moving forward. So the core inspiration for this project came to me from a short series I did during the pandemic. My very first digital pieces, actually. I think this was like the second or third attempt at digital. And this series was called Nightful Kingdom. And Nightful is a word that means it's like a medieval term for like extremely vengeful. And it featured a kind of a cast of medieval characters. There was like a witch, a king, a plague doctor, a thief, dragons, monsters, like a jester, all those different things. And at the time, the series like did numbers. It did really well, and I had a lot of people reaching out to me asking if I planned to write a story with the characters. So I sat down with these characters and I started to play with the idea of like an actual world they could inhabit and like this kingdom called Nightful. And so I started drawing a lot of different concepts, like, additional things like Iron Maidens, executioners, like armor sets, factions, like, the whole nine yards. And eventually I decided I would move forward with this project and this world I started building, and I wanted to make a comic out of it. So, over the years, I've imagined a bunch of different stories I could tell. Like I've done everything from like I wanted to do one with like a western called Snakebite's Revolver King. I had another concept for like a more fantasy story that was a little bit more contemporary, like in the 1800s, and all these different worlds I could build. And I wanted to figure out a way to connect this new story with like some of my previous ideas. And the worlds I built all had one thing in common, and it was this idea of a simple brick well that was kind of like not the bad guy, but the kind of like main dark force in the world, like a dark hole in the earth built by an unknown force that inevitably led to some kind of like terrible, like gruesome outcome. So, therefore, when I started building the world of Nightfall, I kept this well in mind. I started drawing maps and things like that. And at first, they were really simple. It was like a castle, a thicket, caves, etc. Kind of cookie cutter concepts where I could place the characters. But I wasn't falling in love with the concepts I created. So I started thinking about where to put this well. I was like, how can I incorporate a little bit of myself into this? And that's when it came to me. I'm like, what if the entire continent was this well, right? What if the world was built on the rim of a well, right? Like a sinking kingdom in the shape of a crescent moon that was actually, the head of this massive well partially submerged in water, right? So I drew it and I made massive brick sections of this like giant archipelago. I hope I said that right. I started building the world around this idea. And that well had been overflowing for so long that it flooded the world around it with this kind of like black water. And then, terrible things start emerging from the water and terrorizing the kingdom as it was slowly kind of like as the tide rose and the kingdom, slowly like sank and shrunk. So something with this kind of world building I was trying to take into account is like, why is this happening, right? Like, why is there a well? Why is it overflowing? Why are people living on the rim of this? So from here, I imagined what would cause the well to flood like this. I thought of the tides, and I thought of how the moon makes water ebb and flow with its gravity. So the moon became my answer, right? A giant moon that was coming so close that the water of the well was overflowing. So this became my theological system, right? And it revolved around the sun and the moon, right? The sun and moon became powerful deities because they were already impacting this kind of rising water, which is like impacting the entire continent at this point, right? So they have this solid presence in the world outside of just being celestial bodies. And, I decided there would be long days and long nights, right? Each lasting several months. During the day, it would be relatively safe, and the water would kind of like boil and like dissipate and retract. And during the longer nights, the water would rise, and these kind of monstrosities would crawl from these kind of black waters surrounding the kingdom. People would come to worship both the sun and the moon, and the sun represents kind of a more benevolent force, and the moon being more like demonic patron, right? And so this started and was also reinforcing the magic system, right? Because now we have people worshiping the sun and the moon, and so from here we have an idea of champions, right? So we have all these cults, you have all these different things, and now you have like the chosen people, right? And so I decided there would be some kind of like champion's curse or blessing, right? And so in Nightfall, I wanted there to be very little magic with the exceptions of these blessings from the sun and the moon. And at any given time, there would only be a few of these champions walking the continent, right? Maybe four total, two for each is the idea I've had so far. And These champions are seemingly chosen at random, each deity giving specific power as well as a specific curse. I wanted it to be almost at random so that it's more up to the gods themselves and these deities. I wanted to give them this kind of feeling of they know something that everybody else doesn't, right? Like, why would they choose, certain characters over others, right? Because it, kind of pushes forward their agenda, right? I wanted to give that kind of outer god type of feeling where almost Lovecraftian as well, where we don't understand the goals of the sun and moon deity, right? Like, we just know that they are causing problems and we're like at their mercy basically, right? And so I wanted each champion to have a blessing and a curse that kind of related to them. So for the champions of the sun, I wanted to give them a blessing of compulsion, right? Complete control over any person they set their gaze upon, right? And for the curse that went along with it, I wanted it to be, for however long they control somebody, they lose that much time off of their life, right? Like, it feels like a small price to pay for something so powerful, but it adds up the more the power is abused, right? And so the champions of the moon have a blessing of termination, where they, upon exertion, they're able to kill whatever target they see, right? They can just see, no matter what strength level they're at, no matter what is going on, whoever they see and they deem to be their target, they can eliminate, right? And I don't want to spoil what the curse is, but there is a curse that kind of goes along with that as well. So each side has, their own blessing and a curse, right? And the major weakness, right, of these champions is that they cannot use their powers against another champion from either side, right? Upon interacting, their abilities are kind of like nullified. And this leads to like a natural and like kind of vicious rivalry between the sun and the moon champions, each kind of fearing the other as their only weakness, right? So each champion can only be recognized as such when they exert their power, and it's kind of, it shows itself, it manifests, because when they do, their pupils become the shape of either the sun or the moon respectively. So it's not a secret who these people are, right? So, coming back to the world itself, why is this well overflowing, right? So, during the course of the current timeline, something has gone wrong. Something is amiss, and there is an imbalance that is causing the nights to last several months longer than the days. And due to this imbalance, the continent has become increasingly dangerous. The various factions that reside have begun to panic and cause chaos. The water's rising. There's like strange things coming out of the water. The nights are longer. It's just more dangerous in general. So, where do we go from here? What is the established order of this world during this chaos? What is the political system, let's say, right? So up until this point, humanity has existed in this world, let's call it the rim, right? The crescent moon shaped continent, across various like outposts and villages, right? Like in the countryside or whatever. But because of the monsters crawling from the rising water, these communities are increasingly being reduced to like, rubble basically. And the frightening part is these monsters that are coming out of the water are pulling people into the surrounding water. They're not even killing them, they're just dragging them away, right? So it's very frightening. So survivors have consolidated under the flag of Nightful, right? A castle that sits at the highest point of the map, built into a mountain that provides protection to the people inside, right? They're safe from these things coming out of the water. They're safe from the tides because they're so high up. And this place was founded by a character called the Queen. She's the only known champion, and she is the Sun Champion. And she uses her powers to control and defeat any village or militia in her way, establishing kind of like the safe haven for anyone who shares her allegiance to the sun, and kind of pulling everybody in to kind of unite humanity and figure out what the problem is, right? So here, humanity thrives and has become like this kind of imperial outpost that has started oppressing other factions, whether it be human or otherwise, right? And the justification is that, it must be one of these rival factions behind the rising water and the descent of the moon and the kind of like absence of the sun, right? So inquisitors and brigades of warriors are sent to decimate, anyone who opposes Nightfall, right? To take their resources, to kind of like build themselves out and to figure out what's going on, looking for the cause of the disruption. But they, continuously return fruitless. And, the water continues to rise. The only remaining faction that opposes the Queen and Nightfall and this whole like army of people trying to stop the water from rising are the Iron Eaters, right? They're these goblin creatures that live in a massive citadel called the Hilt. It's made completely of iron, and the fortress is impregnable. It blocks off a huge portion of the rim, so no one can get past it. And it's just this huge problem for Nightfall, right? And so iron, on top of that, is the most valuable substance in Nightfall, comparable to the rarity of gold in like our reality, right? And the goblins, these iron eaters, eat it for food, right? And they repel anybody who tries to approach their citadel, their castle, with like these endless volleys of arrows, right? No one can get in. If Nightfall could gain control of this hilt, they would have access to unlimited iron. They'll be able to outfit their army with iron instead of wood and stone and leather or whatever. And as of now, the factions are in a stalemate, and there's no way for Nightfall to breach the hilt and assault the Iron Eaters, who are just kind of like tucked away in here and protected. Like the Queen can't get at them with her powers, and so naturally, Nightfall has been blaming these Iron Eaters for it must be them. It's the only people they haven't conquered. It must be something they're doing, right? And they now blame them for the calamity of the falling moon, right? So this is kind of where the story actually begins. So this is where like I start telling the story of the main character, right? And the story I want to tell revolves around this character Ferris, who is like this kid who has spent his life in the Thicket, which is a village that has remained pretty safe despite everything that's happening. And it's been a safe haven. He's lived a very normal life, all things considered, right? But recently, the village has been attacked more and more frequently as the water's been rising, and the villagers are divided on whether to leave or stay, right? And Ferris's father is the village chief and like a very well-known and mighty warrior, and he intends to leave the village and go west towards the Cypress Grove, where he believes the villagers will be safe and that the oracles that reside there will be able to decipher what's going on. And so, half the village stays behind, not willing to take the risk of traversing the dangerous wilds. And from here, the plot kind of revolves around Ferris and his journey through Nightfall, and how he suddenly becomes the champion of the moon. I don't want to spoil too much about this for anyone interested in the comic, but the story covers his growth over 3 books. In the first book, he becomes like a squire. The second book, he is a knight. In the third book, he is like a commander. And I'm trying to make the plot revolve around his conflicted nature. Wanting to be the champion that Nightfall needs, while simultaneously realizing that there are atrocities being committed on behalf of this kind of imperial regime, and that like things aren't always, or like things are seeming very bizarre and not making sense within the types of propaganda that are being given to the kingdom. So ultimately, he's questioning if what he's doing is saving the kingdom or making the water rise faster. So that's the general idea for my comic and the kind of world around it. I've been really loving this, and I might make a more in-depth video at some point, but I just wanted to share this idea. I've been working on this now for like, I don't even know, like 2 or 3 years, and I'm just wrapping up the first book, and I'm just kind of slowly posting it page by page on Instagram under @NITHEFUL KINGDom if you're interested in following along. So thank you to everyone who has watched this all the way through, and I hope you follow me along on this journey as I continue to flesh everything out. Currently, chapter 1 is out in full, and I'm releasing chapter 2 page by page, and I plan to upload a few more in the coming weeks. Hopefully, I will be able to get through, 2 or 3 chapters in the coming months. So everything's drawn out and written. It's just a matter of inking it and how fast I can do that. So as always, thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys have made this comic possible through your generous support. If you'd like to see the story continued, please consider supporting me on Patreon so I can spend even more time working on the story. Otherwise, consider a commission from me, because I do commission work, and everything helps as far as just letting me do this more. So as always, thank you everyone for watching. I hope I can talk to you again soon. All my links are below, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.